Why is your ex moving so slowly? That question can quietly haunt you after a breakup. The silence, the waiting, the second-guessing. It doesn't just test your patience, it tests your sense of worth. But here's something most people don't tell you. Slow movement doesn't always mean indifference. Sometimes it means the story between you and them isn't as finished as it seems. In this video, I want to walk you through the deeper reasons why their return is taking longer than you expected. Not just from the surface of behavior, but from the emotional undercurrents that shape every decision after a breakup. Because if you understand what's really going on beneath the quiet, you stop taking the silence personally and start responding with calm, clarity, and control. Take a moment to subscribe to Stoic Station if you're drawn to content about relationships, attraction, heartbreak, emotional discipline, and how to carry yourself with strength in uncertain times. There's more to come. But for now, let's begin with one of the most overlooked truths of all. Sometimes your ex is not avoiding you. They're avoiding the pain of what happened when it ended. Reason number 1. The breakup was emotionally difficult. When a breakup is messy, chaotic, and driven by intense emotion, it doesn't simply mark the end of a relationship. It leaves behind an emotional scar that's hard to ignore. And that scar doesn't just live in you. It lives in them too. For your ex, the breakup isn't just a decision they made, it's an experience they endured, one that may have been filled with tension, accusations, crying, pleading, or sudden silence. And whether you meant to or not, if your reaction was overwhelming, if you called repeatedly, begged them to stay, showed up unexpectedly, or said things in desperation, they remember. It becomes part of the story they carry with them whenever the idea of reconciliation crosses their mind. In those quiet moments of reflection, they might be asking themselves, what if I come back and realize nothing has changed? What if I'm wrong again and I have to go through another painful, dramatic goodbye? That question alone can hold them back far longer than you think, because for many people, the fear of repeating pain is often stronger than the desire to relive love. But before you punish yourself for how you handled the breakup, understand something fundamental. Most people do this. Most people react poorly when their world suddenly changes. You cried because you cared. You panicked because it mattered. You didn't want to let go because you weren't ready. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. You weren't broken. You were heartbroken. There's a difference. Still, there's a consequence to that reaction, especially if your ex didn't expect it. It colors their memory of the relationship's final moments. And when they imagine what it would be like to reconnect with you, that memory gets triggered. They hesitate. Not necessarily because they don't have feelings for you, but because they're unsure if revisiting the past means reopening old wounds. That's why what you do afterward becomes so crucial, because something powerful happens when you stop reacting and start reflecting. When you step back, not out of resentment, but from self-respect, everything begins to shift. Your silence becomes different. It's no longer an attempt to punish them or ignore them. It becomes a sign that you're healing, that you're taking your pain seriously, that you're not chasing someone to fill a void, you're working to become whole without them. And in that space, something subtle begins to change in them too. They start to wonder, not in fear, but in curiosity. They begin to ask themselves, wait, how did he let go so gracefully? How did she stop needing me? Why does it feel like they're not hurting anymore? Curiosity isn't the same as attraction, but it's the doorway to it. It's a seed that grows in silence. And if you nourish that space with maturity, calm, and a quiet sense of dignity, your ex begins to see you not as the person who broke down in the end, but as someone who has grown since. This doesn't mean you fake detachment. It means you genuinely do the work. You process your grief. You sit with your emotions. You stop texting not as a tactic, but because you understand that your worth doesn't need to beg. And that shift from fear to strength is what changes the dynamic. It replaces the image they had of you during the breakup with something new, someone grounded, someone self-aware, someone who, even in heartbreak, chose grace over chaos. It's that version of you, the one who evolved in the aftermath, that they might be able to return to. Not because you chased them, but because you became someone they could no longer ignore. Reason number 2. It took them a long time to decide to break up. Most breakups don't come from a single argument or a moment of impulse. They come from quiet internal battles, conflicting emotions that build up over time. If your ex took weeks, months, or even longer to decide to walk away, then it's only natural that they won't undo that choice quickly. They aren't dragging their feet because they've forgotten you. They're moving slowly because they remember every step it took to let you go. During the relationship, they may have second-guessed themselves countless times. Maybe they told themselves to wait it out. Maybe they said, "Let's give it one more weekend, one more conversation, one more chance." That back and forth pattern wasn't just frustrating for you, it was exhausting for them, and that emotional fatigue lingers even after the breakup. It becomes a quiet voice in their mind, telling them not to rush, not to jump back in before they're certain. Now, as the dust settles and they begin to feel your absence, that same inner voice returns, but with a different message. It says, "Maybe I made a mistake." But before they act on that feeling, they hesitate, because the last time they followed their emotions, it led to confusion and pain. They're cautious now, not because they don't feel something for you, but because they don't trust how they feel yet. That's why they may seem distant. It's not rejection, it's reflection. They're not testing you, they're testing themselves. They want to know that if they come back, it won't be temporary, that it won't lead to the same cycle of hope and disappointment. They want to be sure that if this door reopens, it opens to something better than what they left behind. And your role in this moment is not to chase them or demand answers. It's to hold your center, to show, not through words, but through presence, that you've grown, that you've used this time to become more grounded, more aware, more at peace with yourself. Because that's what convinces them this wouldn't be a repeat, it would be a rebirth, not another loop, but a new chapter. One built on clarity, not confusion, one that they can trust. Reason number 3, they think you're still angry and wouldn't take them back. There's something most people never consider when they're waiting for an ex to reach out. Your ex might already have thought about it and stopped themselves at the last second. Not because they've moved on, not because they've forgotten you, but because they assume you wouldn't even respond. In their mind, you're still angry, still hurt, still too closed off to even entertain a conversation. That assumption, quiet and unspoken, can become the invisible wall that keeps both of you in limbo. This is especially true if, after the breakup, your initial reaction was filled with emotional intensity or complete silence. If you cried, yelled, begged, or even disappeared entirely, that last memory becomes their reference point, and people tend to freeze those moments in time. Your ex isn't just remembering the love, they're also remembering the pain they caused, and in doing so, they begin to convince themselves that trying to come back would only reopen wounds that are still bleeding. They may have stared at their phone for hours, drafting and deleting a message, talking themselves into it, and then out of it, over and over again. It's not easy to be the one who walked away and then admit, "Maybe I was wrong." That takes courage, vulnerability, hope, but also fear. And sometimes fear wins. Because what happens if they reach out and you don't answer? What happens if the silence they receive from you confirms everything they were afraid of? They think, I already hurt them. Why would they ever want to hear from me again? And so, even if they feel drawn back to you, even if the desire to reconnect is real, they might convince themselves that they don't deserve another chance, that you've closed the door for good, and that hesitation, born from guilt and fear, can stop a reconciliation before it ever has the chance to begin. Now imagine this. They finally gather the courage to reach out. Maybe it's a small message, a story reaction, a vague, hey, just checking in. It doesn't look like much on the surface, but beneath it is the weight of every anxious thought, every moment of reflection, every hope that maybe, just maybe, you'd be open to reconnecting. And then you ignore it, thinking, if they really care, they'll try harder. But to them, that first attempt wasn't casual. It was everything. And your silence, it confirms the worst. I knew it. They're done with me. There's no way back. If you truly don't want them back, then your silence is your boundary, and that's valid. But if you do still care, if some part of you is open to healing what was broken, understand this. Sometimes a single cold shoulder is enough to silence a heart forever. Not out of anger or pride, but because they believe they've already done enough damage. In moments like that, your strength doesn't need to come from indifference. It comes from clarity, stability, from choosing to respond without drama, without emotional games, but with calm self-respect. You don't need to rush into anything or give them instant reassurance, but you can offer presence. You can create space for an honest conversation, if it's something you still want. Because many times, it's not that they don't want to come back. It's that they don't believe they're allowed to. And sometimes, the difference between silence and healing is just one message answered with grace. Reason number 4. They're in a rebound relationship. It can be a heavy blow to find out that your ex is already seeing someone new. At first glance, it might feel like confirmation that they've moved on, that you've been replaced, that everything you shared was easier to walk away from than you believed. But the truth is, not every new relationship is a sign of healing. In many cases, it's just a distraction dressed up as a fresh start. Rebound relationships aren't always about connection. They're about escape. They're a quick fix for emptiness, a way to fill the silence that comes after walking away from something meaningful. Your ex may not even realize they're doing it, but beneath the surface, there's often a quiet comparison taking place. And as the initial spark fades, as the newness wears off, that comparison becomes harder to ignore. They begin to notice that this new person doesn't know their rhythm. They don't speak their emotional language. There's no shared history, no inside jokes, no foundation built on time and trust. The connection starts to feel shallow, unfamiliar, disconnected from the depth they once had with you. And in that space, when they're lying next to someone who doesn't truly know them, laughing at jokes that don't quite land, or seeking comfort that doesn't fully satisfy, they begin to miss something they thought they were ready to leave behind. Sometimes the rebound becomes the very thing that reminds them of what they gave up. It becomes a mirror, not reflecting the excitement of something new, but the richness of something lost. But that doesn't mean you should interrupt. Don't reach out. Don't try to prove that you're still the better choice. Let them walk through the fog on their own. Because if you try to drag them out of it, they'll only cling tighter to what they're holding. What they need isn't your reminder. It's the silence. It's the contrast. And only time can reveal the difference between real and replacement. When the rebound fades, and it almost always does, they'll look back. And if you've used that time to rebuild yourself, to live fully without bitterness, to grow in quiet strength, they'll feel that shift. They'll remember what it was like to be seen, known, and understood. And they'll realize that the space you once held wasn't just emotional, it was irreplaceable. Not because you fought for it, but because you never had to. Reason number 5. Their friends or family are pressuring them to stay away. Breakups rarely happen in isolation. The moment your ex shares their side of the story, especially in the heat of the moment, the people around them begin to form opinions. Friends, family members, co-workers. They all become part of the emotional jury. And even when their intentions are protective, their influence can be powerful, especially when your ex is still trying to make sense of what happened. Maybe your ex told them about the fights, the distance, the final argument. Maybe they vented while emotions were still raw, and those around them listened, nodded, and encouraged them to stay away. From that point forward, a narrative was born, one that those people feel the need to support. They repeat phrases like, "You're better off," or "You're finally free," or "Don't go back to what broke you." And even if your ex begins to question that story, begins to feel that pull toward you again, they're no longer just managing their own heart. They're managing the weight of everyone else's expectations. Now your ex is caught between two truths. One is the emotional memory of your connection, the laughter, the moments of tenderness, the history no one else saw. The other is the collective voice of people telling them to stay strong by staying away. And that second truth can feel louder, especially when they're still healing. Even if they miss you deeply, they might silence that longing just to avoid disappointing the people who stood by them. But here's what matters most. Love doesn't vanish because it's unpopular. Feelings don't dissolve just because someone's best friend or parent says they should. And if your connection was real, if it meant something that time and space can't erase, then even the loudest voices can't drown that out forever. If someone truly wants to come back, they will find a way, even if it means walking through disapproval or confronting the very advice they once clung to. Your role in this dynamic isn't to argue your worth to their inner circle. It isn't to prove them wrong or beg for your place in their lives. Your role is to remain unshaken, to live with quiet strength and dignity, because when your ex sees that you're not chasing them, not lashing out, not trying to win over their friends, they start to wonder. They begin to see the version of you that doesn't just want them back, but that has grown from the loss. And sometimes that calm you carry, the one that says, "I'm okay either way," becomes more persuasive than any conversation they've had. It separates you from the past version of yourself and shows them what's possible if they do return. Distance created by others doesn't always weaken desire. Sometimes it fuels it. You become the unresolved chapter they can't stop rereading in their mind. The quiet question that lingers after every conversation. What if the story isn't finished yet? And that's a question only they can answer, not because you pushed, but because you let them feel the pull. Summary. What I've just walked you through is the emotional landscape that unfolds after a breakup, not just on the surface, but in the quiet aftermath where real transformation happens. We talked about how the pain of an emotionally intense breakup can linger, how decisions made over months don't unravel overnight, and how silence or guilt can stop your ex from reaching out even when they want to. We explored why rebounds aren't always replacements, and how outside voices, friends, family, can push her away even when her heart is uncertain. But the through line in all of this is simple. It's not about doing more, it's about becoming more. The shift from reaction to reflection, from chasing to grounding, from fear to quiet confidence. That's what changes how she sees you, and more importantly, how you see yourself. You don't win her back by proving anything. You don't rebuild through pressure or performance. You rebuild by standing still, with strength, by showing her through your peace that you're no longer waiting. You're evolving, because a man who no longer needs to be chosen is often the one who gets remembered. That's all I have for you today. But if something I said stirred a thought, a question, or even a quiet moment of reflection, I invite you to share it in the comments. I read them and I do respond. If this spoke to your experience in any way, consider liking this video and subscribing to Stoic Station. We talk about attraction, emotional resilience, relationship dynamics, breakups, and the strength it takes to stay grounded in the chaos. More is coming, thoughtful, real, and always aimed at helping you rise with clarity. I'll see you in the next one.